All right, welcome in for a little bit more spring talk and everything in relationship to that. So here we begin. We've been traveling through our meridians and kind of studying, you know, as we move through this, we talked about the meridians, we talked about the Jing well. And there's always that time as we go through this where we want to make sure that we're really looking at, too, the reason why we study all of this. Why do we go through this information? How is it pertinent? And how do we use it? How do we make it something applicable to life, right? Instead of just, okay, what do I do with this information? So the idea here is we have these, the study of the meridians and, studying in the 5 elements. And a big reason why we use this is to see if we can find a better way to harmonize with the natural tide of life. So life in general gives us a tide. It gives us an up, it gives us a down. And it's really how we surf those ups and downs and how we understand those changes that we can suffer or suffer less at the end of the day. So when we understand these old, I don't want to use the word secrets, but these old wisdom pieces of how we can flow with the times and how we can choreograph our life so that we're working with the world of form. So the world of form is itself is unconscious. And we have 2 choices. We can either drop down into the world of form, which is unconscious matter, or we could be that consciousness, which is consciously working with and maneuvering the matter to work for us and to work with us. And so it's kind of our choice. How do we want to go with this? If we just fall into the mundane and let ourselves be moved by matter, we will just be moved in whatever order that seems to be needed. And usually that's where suffering and different things come in. But if we can find a way to then be the consciousness that moves that around, then we have a way to go. But that, in order to do that, we have to understand the mechanics behind it. We have to understand how to work with this, how to make these wheels kind of go, how to create this structure. So when we study things like the meridians, at first it's just some nebulous concept until you say get sick and you go, okay, well, this meridian, okay, this is happening here, so I can push this point and clear that line, or I can do this stretch and open that up. So those are like one way you could understand the meridians. We went into a nebulous topic with the Jing well theory, and that's even more nebulous. Now you start getting like over the rainbow with it. So this lecture today brings us a little bit closer back to our day-to-day life and reality. How can we behave? How can we work on a conscious level on a day-to-day experience? And this is going to be working with the Horary cycle. So as a natural flow, those 12 meridians in the body that we've been talking about flow in a specific order. They have a specific tide. They have a specific way. So there's 12 meridians, and each day each meridian gets 2 hours per day of high tide, of cleanup crew, of maintenance crew, of fixing whatever damage you did to it yesterday. I don't know what you did, but it needs fixed. So the idea is that meridian line has to be, an organ has to be managed. So not only is it going to be repaired, but what the Horary cycle teaches us is that if one organ is having the main influx of energy, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? Because these are just laws. So if one organ or system is having the most reaction, then another organ is having the least support. So what you want to do is now support the organ that's at the weakest moment. So you don't want to take that organ that's already weak and just punish it. And make it worse? You actually want to find a way to support this. But how can you support it if you don't know the information and you're just kind of wandering around? So that's where I think the brilliance of the Chinese medicine, this does come ultimately way back from the Vedas in Hatha and like yogic styles. But I love how the Chinese took and made it such a clean box. It's such a clean set of information. So here as we go into the Horary cycle, we start to look at this. We want to look at the element that's happening each time of day, the organ that's happening, and then what are the best functions, or what are the functions happening, or the best things to do during that. And then also look at its opposite tide. This will help us later when we go into the 12 animals, and that's going to be more participation on a shun level. So think of this is what I can do on a jing and a chi level with some shun. Okay, so this is how I'm going to find a way to choreograph my day, my time, to see if I can work with the natural harmony on what I physically do and what I'm doing with my energy. On the shun level, we'll get to that with the 12 animals, and that's really going to be a lot of how I can interact with others the best, how I can interact with that time. Have you ever noticed you have a natural pattern where sometimes like you have like you're a lull, you have some high times of the day, you have some of your lull times of the day. So there's going to be some of the personal pieces within that. So here what we do is we start off with the meridian cycle. You can start off with this in a couple of ways. We're going to start oh so often, you'll see even in your textbook, whichever one you have, maybe in the yoga book, in the Secrets Living Forever Young or Self-Care, we start the meridians discussion off with the metal. Okay, so we're always going to have this metal kind of relationship. So we're going to start here with the metal meridians, and we're going to look at it. So the first thing that happens is the metal meridians. Who can tell me what two organs go to the metal element? What two meridians, what two organs belong to metal? Lung and large intestine. Okay, so here what we have is we have a metal, and I'm going to draw, this is my clock for the day, so this is kind of how I drew it. We get 2 hours per block. So this, we're going to start 3 to 5 a.m. Remember we said each organ, so this is going to be a lung time, it's going to be a metal time, it's also going to belong to something called Po. If you don't know what Po is, you will over time. And Po is actually a very important understanding because it is your survival mechanism. It is what keeps you, when you do get sick, heal you. When you do get cut, it is what tells the consciousness to fix that wound. Okay, so this is Po. So 3 to 5 a.m., this lung time. So this is the time of day when actually, if you were to be very strict in your practice, and I know everyone is, you would be up from 3 to 5 a.m. doing your breath work, right? Because she's like, sure, I did it today, every day. So, but the idea is 3 to 5 a.m., but it will tell you also what happens during these times is, one, yes, it'd be a good time to be working on your breath. If you hear the stories of the monks, the masters, the sages, and they sleep like 4 hours a day. They actually sleep between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. And we'll go into that as to why. But they would be up at 3 a.m. and they would be kickstarting their system with deep pranayama and breath work from 3 to 5. This would also include mantra, because mantra is a forced breath work. If you haven't done mantra work yet, it's a forced pranayama because you're forced to inhale and exhale, and it's actually a specific amount of syllables. So this would be the time you'd wake up at 3, they would with a metal bell, and you would begin your breathing practice. I know that's a bit steep order for us here in the West. We like our sleep and our late night binging of Netflix. No, but the idea here is you can also, not only is that what you should be doing during that time, even if you were just laying in bed, like say you happen to be an early bird and you're waking up, you would lay in bed and do your breath work at this point. And that brings you to this meditative state in between anyway, where you're still in a rest and you're still recharging, but you're working on that breath piece. This will also, though, tell you what's happening during your breath. So if you were to do different tests, sleep apnea, stuff like that, snoring is a high tide for snoring at 3 to 5 a.m. because that's giving you an overall view of your lungs and what's happening to those particular organs. So that's something that's going to happen. On a side note, that might be a little bit deep for this topic, but I want to get into it anyway, is the idea with Po. And Po is belonging to the metal element, okay? And there's these seven Po's. We discuss them in the fall, typically, is when we really go into Po. But Po is kind of that a little bit of the dark sider. It has to do with Po typically rules the lower chakras. So first, second, and third chakra. This would be chasing power, sex, and money. These would be low things. These would also be past things and grievances. So if you were to sleep, and most of us do, I'm sure, between 3 to 5 a.m., if you were sleeping and you were having dreams during those times, they would consider usually those dreams are not the lightest dreams. Usually those are heavier, those are darker. They have some symbology of the past. If you are seeing something in the future and you're into that, they'd be more of an omen than anything because it's going to be a little bit more heavier of that Po nature. There is a lighter side to that. We'll get into that later when we come around the clock. But that's usually what happens. So if some people believe in trusting dreams and following that. 3 to 5 may not be the time of dreaming that you prefer to trust that intuition. That might be something more to take to heed as a possible warning or something like that. But either way, if you notice that you happen to snore or your mate tells you that you happen to snore during that time, you might want to work on your breath work. There will be an opposite time of day that will be very important that will tell you what you're doing with your body then. That has a big highlight on what you're going to be breathing like at that point. You can work on breath work at other times of the day that will help you have a better breath here. And not only that, it'll leave you waking feeling refreshed because if you don't breathe well at night, your body isn't oxygenated and you often wake up much more tired than you start with. 3 to 5 a.m. or 5 to 7 a.m. is our next set here. Still belongs to metal. So because there's a yin and a yang, right, for each element, we go yin metal and then yang metal. And this belongs to the large intestine. We don't have to go too far with this. But 5 to 7 a.m. large intestine. So this is a great time of the day to get up and have a bowel movement, or really wish you did. So the idea is if you did your breath work and your low belly breathing during lung cycle and you got the large intestine moving, this should be a natural occurrence because you did do the work. Now you're in harmony. This is your immediate knowing of how well am I already in harmony with the day? How well did I get this going? Also, this is your last little purge of everything that you had from your day before, trying to get that out before you start your next day. This is a metal season or metal time of day. So here with the metal, you are going to, if you were into other items, this is where you would take care of other things that belong to metal. What else belongs to metal? Skin? Nose, yeah. So what I would do maybe is I'm into neti pot. Maybe I would do a neti pot this time of day. Maybe skin brushing if I need to, dry skin brushing for the lymphatic. So I would deal with maybe, but usually we get up and shower. We at least wash the skin. It's said that in the East, they get up in the morning and they do their breath work, and they clean their insides. In the West, we get up and we clean the outside, right? So the question is though, cleaning the outside is following form or matter. It's just looking pretty. But what's happening on the inside? Is that clean too? Now this is living in a different state. So you want to get up, scrub the skin, clean all of that off, clean the nose, clean the intestines out, okay? So you would have that kind of going. And you can see now you've done a metal polishing, if you would, for the day. So I've kind of started out my time. Now what happens is after I move from my metal time, so I got up and I did my breath work. Congratulations, you all did your 2 hours. I spent 2 hours taking care of my metal, okay? Now I emptied the bowels. I did my neti pot. I did my skin brushing. I scrubbed my skin. I put on whatever things I need for the day, right? So I took care of all those aspects and different pieces. Now it's time to break my fast, okay? So to have breakfast. Breaking your fast is the idea in a lot of traditions that you eat during the daylight. Why do you eat during the daylight? Is there's yang energy present, and at night there's no yang energy. So there's no fire, heat, or yang energy to help you come up with. So here we move into 7 to 9 a.m. okay? And 7 to 9 a.m. Belongs to an earth time, which is why I have this. And what are the two organs for earth? Stomach and spleen. So here's where this goes is I'm going to do stomach, and it's going to be yang. So this, how this cycle goes is you'll see it goes yin, yang, yin, yin, yang. So the yang organs always meet up to each other. We'll do this at the end. I'm hoping we have time. We'll do a guided meridian breathing. And it's good to keep going through that because it does follow the horary cycle and it gets you naturally in tuned with that idea. So here, 7 to 9 a.m., we have the stomach's time. So the stomach, they say in Chinese medicine, a very important organ because it feeds all the other organs. Technically, it captures all the food, and then the spleen feeds all the other organs. So it shifts and brings everything out, if you would. So we have this yang stomach, and this is the time when we would break our fast. So you would begin to eat. Now, you want to choose things that are, of course, good for the body. The natural tendency, I find this, especially with children, but even still with me, right, is you wake up and you want something sweet, right? They want a sugar cereal. I think they want that all day. But so you get up and you want something sweet because earth belongs to sweet. So we have this natural desire for the sweet. But ultimately, what we need to do is this is our first fueling process. Technically, if we're following the horary, we have an 8 and 12 hours, okay? There's a side note about how this is actually good for the brain. We can go into that in a different time. But the idea here is I'm going to fuel up on something, usually something yellow. So eggs, pancakes, banana nut muffin, banana, right? Different things, okay? Ultimately, oatmeal. So something yellow, but I'm going to begin to fill up with that because this is my initial fueling for the day. Also, it's a stomach. You'll learn later that this belongs to the dragon, and I always like that. But only in the horary. I want to be very clear with that because each one of these organs and elements, I'm going to talk horary versus overall. But the idea is this would be your time to eat your largest meal. Okay, you have all day to burn this fuel. The sun has just come up, so now you have 12 hours or so of daylight to burn your fuel. So this would be a great time to eat your largest meal, something nutritious, good protein. Maybe you eat eggs, I don't know, everyone's diet is different, but you would get up and you would have that kind of fulfillment. Okay, and the idea with that is because once you've done your full fueling process, we're going to go into 9 to 11 a.m. If I can write today. Hang on, let's try that again. Okay, this is another earth time, but this is yin earth, and this is spleen. Spleen time, now you're officially ready for analytical thinking. You got up at 3 to 5. You didn't do analytical thinking. You did breath work. You did mantra. You became a conduit for the Tao or the higher power, whatever you want to call it. Large intestine, you did all your cleansing. Oh, you stopped and did the fuel station. You filled your gas tank. Now it's time to begin to burn. So what do we mean by begin to burn? Well, we know that thinking takes energy, right? We like to snack when we're doing projects. We like to snack when we're learning. We know we've been mentally tired, or you want to eat or something like that. When you grew up, your mom would tell you can't go to school on an empty stomach. You wanted to, do different things like that. This belongs to yin earth, so still yellow, spleen, analytical thinking. So this would be the time when school goes into full gear if you were into school. Or your grandkids or kids or something like that, because this is the time when the mind is freshest for thinking. This is a good time of day to do taxes, not that you want to do study, to do learning, to absorb. If you want a chance of absorbing information, this would be the best time of day to absorb information, to be able to have it kind of settle in, especially provided that you had a good breakfast. The idea, there's one interesting idea with spleen chi and having food and acquiring knowledge. So each one of these has a shun that goes with it. And if you don't know it, we'll know it over time. So we have the metal element, we already said was a po shun, okay, and that intelligence. Here, this one is actually going to be called a yi shun. So yi has to do with acquired knowledge or your ability to acquire information. There's no mistake that it belongs to the planet Earth. As a lot of people say, our experience here as a soul coming down to this realm is to learn and acquire the knowledge of what it's like to be on planet Earth. We have a little meat suit we run around in, and our soul gets to check out this realm, and we get to acquire the knowledge or pay off the karma. Hopefully not accrue more, but that's a whole different story. So of the planetary experience. So acquired knowledge. Now there's an interesting link between learning and being able to assimilate, and this has to do with food. So there's a physical binding that happens to when you eat something and when you're learning something. The information that you learn has something to bind to food that gets broken down and assimilated into the body, and therefore is something that becomes kind of structurally yours. So you're able to actually embody the information by eating, learning, binding, having it assimilate and drop into your cellular structure is kind of the concept. There's a little bit more that you could go with this of having everything kind of cleaned ahead of time. They do talk about, so there's some, ideas with consciously cooking and eating is never cook when you're mad, never eat when you're mad, always try to eat when you're calm, because you are eating that energy and whoever cooked it. So if you did want to start your day with something that was happily cooked, that's a term, okay, but something that was well prepared, but you would sit and eat that because that is what you're ingesting, okay? But either way, the stomach is capturing that food, and the spleen is then beginning to, on a rudimentary level, you put the food in your stomach, now the energy goes to the spleen, less esoteric, and the spleen begins to go, oh, clear fluid up to the lungs, oh, turbid fluid down, oh, clean food here, oh, that's waste, let's send that down. So it begins to direct the traffic, and that's why earth energy goes both ways, because earth energy takes all of this stuff that you put in your body, goes God knows what, and sends half of it down, half of it up. Does that make sense? Half the food might go through the body in different ways, but the clear fluids go up to the lungs, that hydrates, the turbid fluid goes down, same, and then we have the movement of the food as well. So the spleen does a lot of directional trafficking up and down, okay, and helps divide things up. And it's required for analytical thinking. So that's the time of day you can do that. So here, after 9 to 11 a.m., you have got up and did your breath and mantra. You cleaned all your systems, ready to go. You refueled. You did analytical thinking. This is also the time of the day. They say you should only spend 4 hours a day thinking. The rest of the day should be done just doing. So the idea is you would get up here in the morning and you'd plot out your whole day. This is when you would do your planning, whether it was for the day, whether if you're working on a big project, maybe you spend an hour planning for the day, an hour planning for whatever. If you're a seasonal planner, yearly planner, whatever that is, monthly planner, you plan that kind of out, you do your things. And the other 2 hours doing your picking up the phone, calling, da 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 da. Does that make sense? So those would be kind of your time, if you would. So that would be your time to think. Then what we do is we move from thinking in earth element to doing. Okay, so then we move into fire. And what two organs go with the fire element? Heart and small intestine. And we know this is yin, so this is yin. So what organ? Heart. Oh, let's try that again. 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Now, heart, this is an interesting time. If you have heart concerns, you'll want to go easy. If you have a good heart, it's a good time to move, actually, to exercise, to kind of get moving. This is also a good time to have now a medium-sized lunch, okay? But it'd be best to do some type of activity or movement or something of that nature. Get your heart going, get some cardiovascular movement and things going. You can't overdo it. That wouldn't be a good idea because you do still have a full day of chi that you're going to need to supply. So you can't burn out at this time of day. And that's also what happens during this time. This is a great time now that we hit fire to make sure you're hydrating, because what do we do to control fire? Water. So this would be a great time to start working on hydration, because what's going to happen, especially the next set is going to be another fire we're going to get into, and that's a time where it's a yang fire. So you'll definitely need to hydrate by that point, because by the time you finish your fire, it's going to be told for the day how you did with your fluid levels. But it's interesting with hydration and heart. Make sure you're doing service to your minerals, okay? Because heart has a lot to do with your mineral content for the electrical node in the heart, or for the shock or the pulse, if you would. So I can definitely do things that get my heart going and things of that nature. This is also a good time to get together with those you love, have lunch, okay? A heart time, okay? So you'll see that you'll notice a lot of people like that. This would be a more medium size meal for the day. This definitely wouldn't be a big meal. You've already had your big meal that morning. You've already hit the apex. You're at the apex of noon. So the energy is only going to wane. So this might seem contrary or difficult because we become very set in our Western ways. So it's a very interesting, like, egoic pressure to have to shift over, because we're so set. Well, I've been doing it this way for so long, or maybe our friends or society, or other things. So it's tricky. I'm not going to pretend. But that would be the time where you could do those particular things. Then that leads us to yang fire. Yang fire belongs to the small intestine. And this is going to be 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. This is yang fire. So this is excessive yang. Fire is already yang. Fire itself has a tendency to be excessive, just as water has a tendency to be deficient. Okay? We're naturally deficient in water and naturally excessive in yang, or in fire in general. So here now I have a yang fire. This is the best time of day to take a siesta. This is when you want to take your rest. This is why siestas came into place in the first time. This is a great time for your relaxation or your downtime or something of that nature, depending on your life, of course, and what you have particularly going on. If you do movement, this is probably not the time of day to blaze a crazy hike trail out in the sun, right? So maybe if you were outside or something of that, you would take some time in the shade and allow the body to relax. This is definitely a time for hydration. Probably one of your most important moments or times right here is that hydration, okay? Because that's what's going to kind of come in. So from the small intestine, yang fire, due diligence, try to take a rest, or at least find more of a yin environment to house yourself in to offset the yang fire, okay? So we move. I love the switch in this and how quickly it flips. So we have the metal energy we cut away yesterday. We did our breath. We have a beginning, yi shan, earth energy. We have all things heart. This would be a yuan shen. We're not going to go into that today. But this is an all upward energy. Everything's kind of moving upward, upward, upward. And then what's interesting with the Horary is then at 3 p.m., the bottom drops out. And it does. We have, for water, 2 organs, and those organs are? Okay, and kidney. Now, this is a yang, because remember we went yang, yang, yin, yin, yang, yang, right? So a yang water was urinary bladder. Okay, so water element time of the day, urinary bladder. This is the time of the day where you get to see how you've done with your hydration. If your urine is yellow and scanty, you probably didn't do too well. If it's overly clear, you probably flushed your minerals and make sure you add some back in. So you want the right color. I know this asks you to get deeply involved in your internal substances. So, but the idea here is that that is the urinary bladder. Also, what happens here is 3 to 5, because we went from this upward energy to this heavy downward energy, we have a couple of big things that tend to happen. If I didn't participate in my morning correctly and in my midday correctly, and if I didn't siesta at that yang of fire or that heightened point of it, and I do hit the water, I am going to follow that energy down and I'm going to have my afternoon crash. And it's going to leave me reaching for a Snickers and a fill in the blank. I don't know. Diet Coke. I don't know. Okay. Coffee. Right. That was, she's like, there's a coffee. But reaching for that quick energy fix, because the energy naturally comes down. So we naturally kind of have that. There's an interesting tide that the energy is kind of down. And so what we do as a society is we go to happy hour. We start going to drinking. And so at 3 to 5, it's because the energy is so low that we're going to try and cover that energy and mask it with a very temporary item. Now, remember how I told you that there's a high tide and low tide? This is going to give us our first glimpse of high tide and low tide. So 3 to 5 p.m. offsets my 3 to 5 a.m. So already how I behave during this time is going to be represented and seen in a mirrored image during this time. Does that make sense? And there's no mistake that this is at low tide. The energy is dropped out, and we begin to sedate because we're having to look at the permanence of difficulties of Po. The energy goes also through the day because you've gone up, it's kind of hit your peak for the most part. And now this is your first reality of how did you do that day. That's kind of coming in. So we can see this on a physical level through the urine. We can also recognize how if we emotionally feel low or kind of drop out. And what do we turn to at this time? The more we fall and dump here, the more it would be interesting to see us implement a siesta and downtime here. If you're not having a crash so much here, you're probably doing okay there. Does that make sense? But if you're hitting that wall at 3, you want to go back and look at these hours, right? They actually say you'll be, if you get up, is it 5 or 7? I think it's after 7. I think if you get up after 7, you'll actually be more tired throughout the day than if you got up earlier. So there is a key with getting up during that time. Nobody likes to hear this talk because it's kind of like just a little rough, isn't it? I know. Nobody likes to hear it, but there's the idea of living in accord with nature, and then then you kind of are supported by nature, or you can live against nature and be knocked around by a little bit. Okay, so there's some ideas here. So okay, fine. So we go from yang, water, urinary bladder, to yin, which is kidney. 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. So kidney, water time. This is the time of day to have your third meal. It should be your lightest meal. You'll recognize all the yang energy for the most part has gone. The sun will be setting at some point within this, give or take, unless it's Arizona, and then it's just a mean sun, and it's July, and it's like 9, and somehow that sun is still up. We're begging, please. But just saying, that's when it bites me, you know. So the idea, 5 to 7 p.m., the sun is going down, basically, and we want to eat that last meal, but it should be your lightest meal because you do want it fully or mostly digested before you go to bed and before the yang energy drops out. Because again, this is setting yourself up for how you're going to feel the next day. And maybe you can pull it off once, but if it becomes a habit, this is where we create imbalances in the structure of the body. This is where we do create imbalances in the physical organs and things of that nature. So the idea here is kidneys in Chinese medicine are responsible for your aging, how quickly you age or how slowly you age, how well you age. And this is, so during the kidney time, have that light meal, okay? And also begin to shake off your day. This is a good time to de-stress, to let go. It's water. Let it wash away. Whatever happened that day, it's done. It's gone. It's over. Begin leaving it in that day. This is your beginning of the cycle. So this is your large intestine. I told you at the beginning of this, this is where you finish letting go of whatever you kept the day before. This is the final jing. This is opposite. It begins with shun here. At first, shun. I'm going to begin to let go mentally of whatever happened that day. I won't let go of the full jing until the next morning at 5 to 7 because I have to wait. Jing moves slower than mine. But I do want to begin to let this go, okay? Also, you'll notice there'll be a direct proportion in between what you eat and how you eat here and the quality of these movements that occur here, okay? So if you want to eat a 20-ounce porterhouse, said thing, at 7 p.m. at night, you probably won't have a lot of success during this time in the next morning. It will be difficult. So it might be better to have, if you're a meat eater, steak and eggs for breakfast than late at night. Not necessarily don't eat it, maybe augment the time in which you do. Okay, but this should be a very light meal. This should be, if you notice, 5 to 7. We have in Western society an opposite way of doing this. We push hardcore through it. We beg everyone to skip their lunch break and their downtime and their rest. And then during kidney cycle, when we're at our peak of aging, instead of sitting at home and eating a nice meal that's small and quiet, we get ourselves in rush hour and stare at a setting sun as we drive frantically home. Okay, and so this only increases the aging process and what should happen. So if you could design your life, first of all, you always live east of your work or of your hobby, so you're not driving into the sun. And B, you set up a life where you can have a downtime between 1 and 3, and between 5 and 7, you are, to the most part, done with your day. You are able to do your thinking in the morning. Does that make sense? Your activity. And then you're able to have that light meal and let it kind of wash away, if you would. And this will lay over more when we go into the Chinese animals. I didn't know if I won't get to them today, so we'll do that next week. I'm kind of powering through this. We have Po. Yuan is your Z-H-I, because it sounds just like it's spelled. Z-H-I, Zhur. Zhur. This is Zhur, and we'll go into I do more of the 5 a little bit here and there, but I'll go into all 5 elements in Earth season. So late summer, we'll be driving into the 5 shuns. Okay, quite a bit, just so you know where they're going. Okay, so then we go from 5 to 7 p.m. and we go into 7 to 9 p.m. And here we've hit Qi. And am I in Yin Qi or Yang Qi? Yin. Or Kimchi? Just kidding. Oh, and I wrote it. It is too late for kimchi. Unless you messed up here and then you have to have kimchi because you have heartburn. That's great. So here, what is the yin qi organ? Pericardium. Pericardium, the fluid-like sac that surrounds and protects the heart. Great time to spend time with those you love and that are around your heart. This is a good time also if you, depending on your phases of life. So now what we have to do is we have to get a little more detailed to know not only our body type, okay, our consciousness, the natural times of the day, but also to get to know where we are in the season of life. Depending on how we're, or just in general, depending how we're doing, this is the other time of day that's very good for light training. This is actually a good time of day because there's qi. This is a good time for yoga, tai chi, qigong, meditation. I don't know if in the metal season this would be a time for intense cardio or anything of that nature. If you're going to do that in a metal season, I would do it and even the word intense would be removed, more in the other hours of the day. But you can do training during this time. Pericardium, this would be community time, uh, time with your loved ones. Maybe if you sit around and have a cup of tea, I don't know what you do, but sit around and enjoy the company, because that's what the pericardium does. It's all about protecting the emotions. So this would not be the time to read upsetting news. This would not be the time to go into a lot of upsetting stuff. This would be time to kind of protect and nourish the heart. Whatever you've done with the day, if you read news or upsetting stuff, you did that here. You let it go here. And now here you want to do things that soothe and protect, because you decided to go inward, and you're going to be in kind of that more protected realm through here. This is your outward time of the day. This is more inward time of the day. Does that make sense? Okay. And again, if you notice, you spent your 4 hours thinking. Here we just did. We're still doing. Okay. So pericardium, that's a good time of day just to enjoy those friends and family. So now we go into 9 to 11 p.m. and I have Qi again. And I have Yang Qi. Organ, please. Triple burner. Triple burner rules all your organs. It's time for you and your organs to go to bed. So triple burner, respiration, digestion, and elimination. Triple warmer oversees all of your organ functions. This is the time to begin to close the doors, wrap things up, okay, and begin to kind of shut everything down, get ready. And ideally, you would begin by 11 p.m., you would be in bed, okay? And so 9 to 11, you have that time to slowly shut down all the stuff, shut down the processes, things of that nature. So then you kind of come into that. This takes us to probably longer topics, but we'll see how we do here. So now we have 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. And this is going to be our wood time, mostly because that's all we have left. And I have yin wood and yang wood, but I ended with yang, so now I'm going to do yang. So yang wood organ, gallbladder. Okay, so here, gallbladder, I want to be in my deeper sleeps or beginning my REM cycles, things of that nature. So I can begin to allow the gallbladder to do its functioning. It has a lot to do with how we sleep in general, and it's going to prepare us, excuse me, for what comes next, which is going to be for the liver. And that's the last one, but I think you already knew it, so I didn't really give it away. So for the liver, and that's 1 to 3 a.m. Okay, so the gallbladder is going to give us all of that preparation that we need. We should have gone through a lot of our cycles. And then when we hit that, as everything has shut down by 1 to 3 a.m., we want to have hit far enough cycles and had the blood in the body shifted to the liver. So the idea here is when you are awake, what is opposite of gallbladder is heart. So what happens is when the heart energy is in full swing, the heart or the fire energy, we could just say, the wood energy is at most efficient. So wood energy here has a lot to do with controlling our blood. When we're pumping the heart and fire, we're literally pumping cardiovascular, we're pumping blood through the body. So I want to be able to pump blood through the body and get it through all of my connective tissues, right? If it's not out in my body and in my blood and my connective tissues, then it goes back into the liver and it's being repaired. So it's being fixed. So what happens at 1 to 3, the liver swells, fills with blood. The blood is then fixed and repaired. Things like ammonia and different things are pulled out of the blood. Toxins, they say you can die faster from staying up than from not eating because your blood is poison, especially depending on what you did throughout the day. So you should be asleep during this time because this is also only going to be you're only going to be as strong during this time as you were down here. Have you ever noticed the more you stay up late, the harder this crash is? Why? Because it's a direct relation as to what's happening. So we have this 11 p.m. to 1 and 1 to 3 should be asleep enough, meaning you've been still long enough that your body doesn't need blood anywhere but its liver. So if you're getting up and hanging out and doing stuff and you think, well, I'm going to go to bed at 1, your blood hasn't had enough time and your tissues haven't had enough time to kind of cool down. Does that make sense? Because that means you're still pumping the system. So what I want to encourage you with this, take some time and get to know this cycle. Look at your day-to-day life. Look at when you're having crashes and see how not only you can participate best in one element, but how that element is either supporting or harming the opposite time. Does that make sense? Do you feel crash here? Maybe you have insomnia. They actually link a lot of insomnia to dehydration. What are you supposed to be doing in the opposite time? Hydrating. Okay? So you want to have hydration for this, because the wood's only going to be as nourished as much as you dry it out. So you can look at each one of these and how they offset each other. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. That's my big Horary. It's a power one. Okay? Questions? Yes.
For people with insomnia, say you're awake from 1 to 3, you lay very still rather than getting up and moving around. Will the liver still, will the blood return?
Yeah, your best if you can do. So what you can do during that time is liver, and this is Hun. What's the shun for this? Trick question. There isn't one. But you could go with this, just ultimate shun. So this is Hun. So if you do have insomnia, the worst thing you can do is get up and move around. The best thing you could do is lay there, believe it or not, look at your third eye, because this has to do with the 3 Hun and the liver. So if you lay perfectly still, look at the third eye and do your breath work. And that's a good question. And I get that question. Yeah, I get that question quite a bit. And so the question was, what if my timing of my life is like an hour off or so from the Horary, basically? And that's, I've had that question, many, many times throughout the years. And usually if you're in the ballpark, you're pretty good and you're okay. Because everyone has, different times. You probably just wouldn't want to push it or skip that, would be my suggestion. So if you were saying, well, I'm generally occupied 11 to 1, so should I stop and eat, or is it okay if I eat just after 1 or something like that, 2 o'clock? My suggestion would be go ahead, but then take your rest, okay? Technically, it's 100 steps and then a rest, but I'll leave you alone on that. And then, but like, don't skip it or something just because, oh, I didn't get it. You're better off having something than missing it. But, keep in mind to keep your spleen chi going, so you could keep, depending on everyone's diet, snacks or different things. So you can kind of play with that. I had, who was it? I met a lady, we went and taught in Boston. She's younger, she's probably 25. And she kept every day at 3 p.m., she has an asthma attack, like clockwork. So she was doing something offsetting here, but it was like clockwork. So, I'll see her again this year. I gave her some ideas, which would definitely be doing some breath work here, taking siesta here, seeing if she can't support that idea here. But you can move this around a little bit if you need to. And then if it's not something that you do 7 days a week, maybe 3 days a week, and maybe the other days you can pick pretty close. And mine isn't perfect. We try to eat actually pretty early. We eat like right at 5. My 14-year-old can't stand it, but it's fun for us. He wants to eat at like 7. I'm like, I can't eat then. But whatever works, kind of close in there. And I think too, it kind of changes with the seasonal life and even with the seasons, because I know in the winter I'll want to eat earlier, and in the summer, just because it's so hot here, I don't want to put anything in my body till later. I'm like, I don't even get hungry till as soon as that sun drops behind any mountain. I'm like, okay, now you can eat. but there's that hot, hot, hot where you don't even want anything in your system. So you'll play with it a little bit.
Is it in the right kind of way?
Yeah, whatever you can do to keep your spleen chi going so you don't bottom out. That's the biggest thing, is probably just not bottoming out. But it's usually okay to bottom out here, depending on, but of course I can't speak for everyone if you have blood sugar issues and things like that. But there is a health, and we'll do that in a later event, of not eating during this time. But you should be relatively sedentary. You're eating here because you're moving. You're eating here because you're relatively sedentary. And if you're not relatively sedentary here, you might want to look at what you're doing in general. Not every day, there's sometimes you might do something, but on a overall scheme. Did you have something, Linda?
My question was, when you said something about having insomnia and they still look at the third eye, that just in the wood time?
Well, I don't know if they would consider this insomnia because you're supposed to be up.
No, I mean,
Here.
yeah, okay.
This would be probably insomnia hours, I think would be I am not a Western doctor, what they consider insomnia, but I know Eastern wise, this is the time when you're supposed to sleep. So I don't know if they would consider the other hours to be insomnia hours. Does that make sense? But you could do it any time. You could still work, I don't know, I mean, you could work on 3-part breath here and here just on general breathing. Does that make sense?
Wake up, go to the bathroom every 2 hours.
You wake up to go. I hear that a lot. So I think the best thing to know with that is that you don't have any blood in your tissue. So before you get up, I tap spleen, tap your toes, point and flex, kick your feet around. Before you stand on your feet, be conscious enough to know that you have blood in your liver, especially as I think we get older and the feet might feel number, or we might not have the balance we want, or things of that nature. A lot of the times is too, there's a reverse to that. If I'm somebody who just kind of spends my day in my lazy chair, I'm going to have most of the blood in my liver. And then when I get up, I'm not going to feel my tissues. Does that make sense? So if you are going to get up and go to the bathroom, I recommend getting some blood in your tissue just for a minute before you get up. Okay. Probably can't do belly breathing because you have to go to the bathroom. But I'm just saying that may not work. But get blood in your tissues. And I would try to use only enough light that you need not to hurt yourself, because you want to try and stay inward as much. So eyes just enough, try to be mindful about having a clean path to the bathroom. Don't get hurt. Turn on what lights you need. I have to say this as a disclaimer, but I do know if I have to get up at night, I do braille drive my way. Because I like to keep as much of this in, because otherwise I have to go back through the process of working, unpeeling all of that off and working my way and closing the doors back in. Because somehow you wake up and you see a toothbrush and you're like, I'm out of toothpaste. Well, I'm also out of this. Did I get my oil changed? Right? And so you're off on a tangent. So I know, the mind, right? So I try to do things like that. That's a good question, right? If you have to get up at night, use the restroom, get blood in your tissue. Other questions? No? All right, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.